네, 여러분 즐거운 식사 시간 보내셨을까요? 지금부터
So,
두
did you
번째
enjoy your
플래너리 세션을
luncheon? Now we will
시작하겠습니다.
begin the
이번
plenary
플래너리
session.
세션은 한반도와 동북아,
So, now
평화와
we will
협력의
be
주제로 패널
having a
관계와
look
토론이
at the Korean
진행되겠습니다.
Peninsula and Northeast Asia
존댓말은
road to
다양한
peaceful
국제 정세
coexistence.
속에서 한반도와
So,
동북아가
we are
직면한
seeing a
구조적인
changing
구조적 과제를
landscape of the
진단하고
international
지속
political
가능한 평화 공존
situation,
전략을
and
모색하는
we will
자리로
seek for
마련했습니다.
ways for
이를 위해
coexistence. And for
이
that, we are joined by
전문가들이 한 자리에
experts from
모였는데요.
around the world,
각국의
including the
전략적
US,
측을
Japan,
유포하고 갈등의
China, and
원인,
Russia.
선봉을
And
하나따라
we will
묻고
be
제도적,
sharing our
제도적 협력의 틀을
insights as
마련하기
well
위한
as talk
논의를
about
통해서
ways for
공존을 위한
conflicts and
공통의
controversies.
접점을 찾아가는
Also, we will be
전략적 담론의
discussing
장이 될
ways to
예정입니다.
come up with more
네, 무대
effective
위에 플래너리
measures.
세션 과장님과
And
패널분들을
now
모셔보았습니다. 먼저
our
팬분들로
panelists
소개해
and the
주시기
moderator
바랍니다.
is already on stage. Please welcome them with a big round of
네,
applause.
과장님 소개
First
올리겠습니다.
of all, let me
홍현희
introduce
세종연구소
our moderator.
명예연구위원님이세요. 네,
Mr.
여러분
Hong
다시 한번
Hyun-ik
큰 박수
is a senior
부탁드리겠습니다.
fellow at the Sejong Institute. Please welcome him.
네, 마이크를 제장님께
And let me pass
돌려드리겠습니다.
my microphone to him.
아, 네. 노여준 통역 리시버 사용해 주시면 되겠습니다.
Please use the receiver for the interpretation service. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. So I see we are joined by a lot of audience today at this prestigious forum, and I am very honored to serve as a moderator for this plenary session. And as introduced, I am an emeritus senior fellow at the Sejong Institute. Actually, I used to serve as a chancellor of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, and currently I am also working as a committee member to form an economic plan for the next 5 year in the Lee Jae-myung administration. And his diplomatic policy and unification policy are very familiar to me because I was the one who was in that committee to design that policies. And we are joined by special experts on the Korean Peninsula. Well, next month we will be holding APEC 2025 in Gyeongju, and recently we held the US Korea summit, and also there are a lot of controversies over tariffs imposed by the US, and also foreign FDI for Korea is also being discussed actively. Well, we know that we have been helping one another with the US until now, but now we are going through somewhat a difficult situation. And the tariff about 3.5 thousand US dollars is a very high figure, and because of this, we are now having a little conflict with the US. And not only that, the security related issues and defense related issues, including improving our defense fee up to 900%. And the US is now requesting a few proposals to the South Korean government. So we can say that we are experiencing a lot of volatile situation, and we have to tackle and address these issues to continue having a friendly relationship with the US, and at the same time we will have to resume dialogue with North Korea so that we can bring long-lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula, and that will also restore peace in the Northeast Asian region. And for that, of course, the South Korean government's efforts will be essential, but at the same time, we will have to ask for help from our neighboring countries. So, first and foremost, we will be listening to the opinion from the US experts, and also we will take a look at Japanese cases and have a look at trilateral relations between Korea, the US, and Japan. Also, another country to mention is Russia. Well, we can't say that we are now in a friendly relation, but still, Russia is playing a great role in our defense and security. So we will take a look at the four powers backgrounds and we will take a listen to their thoughts on the Korean Peninsula. So now I will ask them to deliver their remarks for about 12 minutes. And later on, I'll give them some questions and we will discuss a few topics regarding this agenda. And I will pass my microphone to the floor. So if you have any questions, please do let us know. And I hope it would be very fruitful discussion. And now, I would like to introduce our four panelists. First and foremost, the U.S. expert from Mansfield Foundation. He is an expert in the U.S.-Japan relations, Mr. Frank Januzzi. And then the second panelist is from China, the country where we are partnering with. And the second speaker is a professor and former dean of School of International Studies at Peking University, Mr. Jia Qingguo. And the next panelist is an expert in the Korean Peninsula, and he is a professor at Keio University, Professor Sueya Yoshide. And lastly, we're joined by Russian expert. I would say he knows a lot about the Korean Peninsula. Well, as far as I know that you can speak Korean quite well, and you studied about South Korea for about 30 to 40 years, and we are joined by Mr. Georgi Tolorea. So, in that order that I've introduced, we will be having a 12 minutes of discussion.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and I'm delighted to appear here with three old friends who I've met in Moscow and Tokyo at Keio University and in Beijing. And we have 5 party talks on stage. Only one voice is missing, so perhaps next year we can have 6 party talks. My theme this afternoon is on trilateralism, and I will try not to put you to sleep during my 12 minutes, because I believe that trilateralism offers us a way forward. US, ROK, Japan, Hanmi-il coordination on policy toward both regional problems like North Korea and global challenges like the liberal democratic order that we heard this morning is under some testing. Indeed, I believe that in a time of testing of the liberal democratic order, coordination and cooperation among like-minded democratic states is more important than ever. Korea's interest is not in opposing the changes in the world that is happening all around us. Korea's interest is in ensuring that its own national interests can be preserved, that they can navigate a way forward with resilience and foresight in the face of these challenges. And I believe that trilateral coordination between the US, South Korea, and Japan can help all three nations manage the complex challenges, whether it's climate change, aggression on the global stage, or indeed the resilience of the global economy at a time of great stress. The basic logic of trilateralism has been affirmed by President Lee Jae-myung during his visit both to Tokyo and then also in Washington, D.C., where he and Prime Minister Ishiba of Japan agreed to enhance trilateral coordination with the United States, particularly in the areas of defense and economic security, but also in high-tech and chips, artificial intelligence, and finally, they also touched on North Korea policy and coordination on the peninsula. President Lee's forward-looking agenda reflects both his pragmatism, but also the shared recognition that trilateral cooperation makes all three countries more effective on the global stage, and that all three countries share many common interests, whether it's on critical minerals or the resiliency of economic growth, non-proliferation, and global security. I'm 60 years old, and for all of my life, Korea has been divided. And North Korea currently has shown few, if any, signs of re-engaging diplomatically on the global stage. But the environment remains fluid, and as the Trump-Lee summit in Washington, D.C. on August 25th demonstrated, President Trump has a sincere interest in re-engaging with North Korea if possible. I commend the president for his desire to not just let the status quo be the reality that we are compelled to live with for another 60 years. I would hope that in the time of my daughter's life, there can be real progress on the Korean Peninsula. But if there is to be progress, it's going to require more than just the efforts of South Korea, more than just the efforts of the North Korean leadership. It's going to require regional and global cooperation, because the reasons for the division of the peninsula are not just found here on the peninsula. They're linked to historical antecedents about which the people of the Korean Peninsula are not truly masters. It's the Korean Peninsula, it's not the American Peninsula, or the Russian Peninsula, or the Japanese Peninsula, but there cannot be lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula without coordination by the global powers. So the logic of trilateralism, I think, is sound, but I want to address what might be the elephant in the room. Is trilateralism about Cold War bloc politics? Is the US ROK Japan alliance meant to be some kind of an alliance against Russia, China, North Korea? Some people might have it be this way. I think this would be a grave mistake. Trilateralism should not be about bloc politics. Trilateralism should be about what the US, ROK, and Japan can do together to make the world a more verdant, prosperous, secure place. It need not be an alignment against anyone. At its core, trilateralism should not be about bloc politics. It's about building our capacity in an era of uncertainty and change. It's important especially for the Republic of Korea, because Korea alone cannot solve the security dilemma that drives North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Even the most forward-looking, compassionate, kind-hearted, and gracious South Korean government could never convince North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons without the United States also addressing the core security concerns of the DPRK, which are, at the end of the day, at the heart of the nuclear puzzle. My mentor, Mike Mansfield, used to have an expression that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should do everything in that ratio. We heard this morning from Dr. Sandel that listening is a key component of international relations and success in peacemaking. And Mansfield would surely agree with this. And it is Mansfield's philosophy of intentional listening that animates everything we do at the Mansfield Foundation. The Mansfield Foundation supports trilateral dialogue in Northeast Asia precisely because we believe that sustained working level relationships and trust building is essential if we are going to build enduring political institutions and transition from this period of uncertainty into a period of peaceful coexistence, and hopefully then building from peaceful coexistence to mutual respect and cooperation. Through programs like our legislative dialogue, named for Thomas Foley, where we bring together Japanese, South Korean, and American lawmakers for intensive, off-the-record dialogue. This will be happening soon in October in Tokyo. Through programs bringing together nuclear experts from South Korea, Japan, and the United States to study the issues of nuclear waste management and cleaning up the mess in North Korea's nuclear establishment at Yongbyon. Through programs enhancing the role of women in business and women in politics, bringing together experts from South Korea, Japan, and the US. Through all of these kinds of initiatives, the Mansfield Foundation strives to support the people-to-people ties at the heart of trilateralism. There are a lot of crises in the world right now, too many for the US, ROK, and Japan to tackle independently, and even our combined efforts may be insufficient to bring peace in Ukraine, or peace to Gaza, or to mitigate the damages caused by global warming and climate change. But surely through our combined efforts, we will be stronger and more resilient than we are working independently. My old boss, Senator Joe Biden, once told me that the three most important words that anyone could say when they're asked a tough question is, "I don't know." Because you must be humble in the face of the challenges of the global challenges. We don't know everything. But this I know. I know that the US, ROK, Japan triangle has more capacity to affect change in the world than any other triangle. And I think it should be the responsibility of the leaders of all three countries to strive to make that triangle an equilateral triangle. What do I mean by this? Well, I think it's very clear if you've studied your high school geometry. There are three legs to any triangle, and the US ROK leg is very strong, and the US Japan leg is very strong, but the Japan ROK leg traditionally has been the weakest leg in this triangle. This is why I commend President Lee, like his predecessor, President Yoon, for their initiative to try to strengthen ROK-Japan relations in a time of real challenges on the Korean Peninsula. It requires political courage in both capitals. The three leaders who convened at Camp David, President Biden, Prime Minister Ishiba, and President Yoon, are all gone from the global stage, or will be soon, in terms of their leadership. But the triangle that they forged will endure. And I believe that it will serve the interests of all three countries. And it can serve a platform for engagement with the DPRK that is coordinated, that reduces the risk of misalignment among great powers, and ensures that the interests of these key stakeholders are all respected in the process of any peace process on the Korean Peninsula. President Trump is known for his passion to engage on the Korean Peninsula. My hope is that he will do so in a coordinated and sustained way in close partnership with friends here in Seoul and the government of South Korea, but also in Tokyo. And indeed, the door must be open to friends in China and Russia, because any resilient, sustainable solution to the challenges we face from North Korea's nuclear arsenal and their pursuit of nuclear weapons cannot really be accomplished without the global powers that have a stake in the Korean Peninsula being in alignment in pursuit of peace and denuclearization on that peninsula. So consider this my plea for trilateralism, and I look forward to hearing remarks from my colleagues as they approach both the challenges of peaceful coexistence here on the peninsula, as well as peace and security between the United States and China and Russia, and of course our friends in Japan. Thank you so much.
네, 잔우지 선생님
Thank you very
감사합니다.
much.
예, 이처럼 동북아
So,
한반도 평화를 위해서
For the Korean
한국과
Peninsula
미국,
and
일본
Northeast
세 나라
Asia,
간의
we were able to see how the trilateral cooperation plays a great role. And thank you very much for emphasizing these points. However, in Northeast Asia, there are not only Korea, Japan, but there is North Korea and Russia and other countries as well. So I would like to now take a listen to their view. I think Mr. Cha Ching-kuo will be able to share their perception. So please stick with the 12 minutes discussion.
Well, thank you, Chairman. It's great to be here. I share the view of my friend Frank Janussi that it's really a happy moment to see old friends on the same panel. The following comments are my thoughts about the path to peace in the Korean Peninsula. They are not that new, but then to realize that into reality can be very difficult. I think the pursuit of peace on the Korean Peninsula is a complex endeavor that demands a multi-pronged approach. It hinges on the combination of diplomatic engagement, security guarantees, economic incentives, and also verifiable denuclearization. A multi-step process encompassing confidence building, engagement, negotiation, settlement is essential. And joint efforts by key stakeholders such as two Koreas, China, the US, Russia, and Japan are indispensable. Confidence building serves as the cornerstone for any meaningful process of peace. It is about reducing hostility and establishing a basis level of trust for peaceful coexistence. One of the key aspects is refraining from actions that the other side perceives as provocative and hostile. Military exercises, often seen as a show of force, can heighten tensions. Maybe we can suspend them. Hostile rhetoric and propaganda, whether through official statements or media, also fuel animosity. Even seemingly minor acts like sending propaganda or shit balloons across the borders can lead to escalations. So somehow, we need to manage these issues and make sure that they don't provoke each other and push each other into a cycle of tensions. By seizing such actions, the two Koreas can create a more stable and less threatening environment. Then, sending positive signals for reconciliation is equally important. Expressing a willingness to re-engage without conditions on an equal and mutually respectful basis can be a powerful gesture in this regard. Issuing statements that encourage positive behavior from the other side can set a constructive tone. So you want to say nice things about what the other side says and does to express, to send a message of goodwill. Reducing the number of troops near the border can also be a visible sign of commitment to peace. Okay. Whether you withdraw, how many troops you are withdrawing matters, but then the fact that you withdraw troops from the border itself can send a positive message. Okay. Additionally, establishing communication channels, especially between military officials at the front, can be vital, okay, to make sure that no accidents occurred, escalate into confrontation or conflicts. These channels can prevent miscalculation and could potentially lead to military confrontations. In times of crisis, direct and open communication can help de-escalate situation and avoid misunderstandings. Once a certain level of confidence is built, engagement becomes the next step. All parties concerned should be prepared to resume talks whenever opportunity arises. Engagement without preconditions helps lower the threshold of negotiation or consultation and allows for more open and flexible dialogue. Other stakeholders, particularly China and the US, play a significant role in this phase. They should communicate with the two Koreas about possible revenues for engagement. Moreover, China, the US, Japan, and Russia should engage with each other to explore ways to achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula. This multilateral approach can help bring different perspectives and also bring in resources, increasing the chance of success of the engagement. When engagement is well established, negotiation becomes the focus. Bilateral negotiation between the two Koreas can be a continuous process, okay? Never regarded as a one-shot thing. First, the concerned parties need to agree on the time, venue, and also issues for talks. This provides a structured framework for negotiation process. Temporary freezing of the status quo can prevent any hasty and unilateral actions which could derail the negotiations. A package deal is necessary for a comprehensive solution. It should include denuclearization, which is a long-standing international goal, as well as the goal of the concerned parties. Okay. Maybe in the long run, it's also in the best interest of North Korea because it can get out of international isolation and also embark on, in theory, a more prosperous path of development. Okay. Security guarantees are necessary to assure North Korea of its safety. The reason that North Korea developed nuclear weapons, I think one of the reasons at least, is the growing asymmetry in terms of conventional capabilities between the two Koreas. Okay. So you must make sure North Korea feels secure without nuclear weapons. Economic assistance can help North Korea develop its economy and improve the living standard of its own people. Verification guarantees can ensure that all parties adhere to the agreed upon terms. And of course, bring the US on the board and other countries. Finally, a peace treaty can formally end the state of war that has existed on the Korean Peninsula since the 1950s. So a step-by-step or action-for-action approach is also advisable, allowing the parties to achieve different goals at different stages, making the process more manageable and less overwhelming. Multi-party negotiation is essential for a comprehensive and lasting solution on the Korean Peninsula. Involving all the key stakeholders is crucial as it ensures the diverse perspectives and interests are taken into account. So that makes the eventual package of solution more sustainable. The terms of the agreement in these negotiations cover multiple aspects. Security guarantees are a top priority. The key stakeholders must provide assurance for both Koreas, alleviating their fear of external aggression. Verification mechanisms are equally vital to ensure the major parties get involved, have a stake, and robust systems need to be established to ensure North Korea's compliance with denuclearization promises, agreements. This builds trust among all parties and ensures that the disarmament process is credible. Economic assistance also plays a significant role. By helping North Korea's economic development, it reduces the incentive for the country to pursue weapon programs. A prosperous North Korea is more likely to focus on peaceful development and integration into the international community. Additionally, a peace treaty is necessary to formally end the war status of the Korean Peninsula, bring a sense of closure and stability. We have talked about this before, okay? And we failed in our last efforts. Okay? But our failure is not an excuse for us not to try it. Okay? There are many reasons for the previous failures. Okay? Some, you can attribute to the North Korean side. Some, it's our own problems, okay? Especially domestic developments. While the path for peace outlined above may seem idealistic, it is currently the only pragmatic approach, it seems to me, especially in the long run. There are indeed numerous obstacles. The existing hostility between Seoul and Pyongyang, along with the escalating tension between China and the US, complicates the situation. However, an undeniable reality is that war is unacceptable for all stakeholders in the peninsula. It is in their best interest to find a peaceful way out of the current impasse. To achieve this, all parties' concerns, interests, especially those of the North Korea, the most vulnerable party, must be taken into account seriously. Only through an inclusive, sincere, multi-party negotiation can a sustainable peace be achieved on the Korean Peninsula. This is my talk. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다. 자칭거 선생님.
Thank you very much.
네, 한반도에서 북한과 함께
So,
들어가는 방법
bringing peace on the Korean Peninsula. He suggested very detailed measures and explained the reason for the proposals. Well, the current administration, the Lee Jae-myung administration, also expressed its willingness to bring peace on the Korean Peninsula in his previous remarks.
자칭고 선생님 얘기하신
And
것보다
as
얘기하신 것처럼
Professor Cha Ching-kuo mentioned,
더 중요하다.
peace is even more important than unification.
대화가 단절돼 있는
And as we are seeing a ceased conversation between the two Koreas, it is crucial to resume dialogue.
큰 기조로서 북한이 만약에 싸움을
But
걸는다면
if North Korea provokes South Korea, we will of course have to win. But winning without having a fight is the most important thing.
제가 한마디 더
And
덧붙인다면
I would like to add on that.
이렇게
by
분단된
making
민족 간에
peace.
적대적으로 지내지만 서로
Although we are now separated, but we will be able to cooperate with each other and also improve interests for stakeholders. And I think that would be appropriate way for us to pursue. That's why Lee Jae-myung administration is now pursuing to have mutual conversation. And according to him, North Korea will one day come back to the table and resume talks. And by building trust, we will be able to restore military agreement that was put on hold. And also we will be able to have cooperation in various sectors, including economic sector, and that will allow us to bring peace on the Korean Peninsula. And the Germany was able to unify the country after 17 years of separation. Likewise, maybe we can follow the good example of Germany, and we will have to pursue our interest for the two Koreas, and in the end we will be able to also achieve unification on the Korean Peninsula. That was the Lee Jae-myung administration's expression. And let me pass my microphone to Soeya Yoshihide, professor from Japan. He will be talking about the Korean Peninsula and the peaceful coexistence.
Dr. Holmes, thank you very much for chairing this session, and I'd like to thank the Ministry of Unification for inviting me and as well as us. Good reunion for all of us, and this sort of intellectual exercise has always been, very, very, very rewarding. And given the chairman's intervention, I'm sorry, when I saw the title of this session, I thought this was about coexistence among us in this part of the world. And that's how I wrote my presentation, and not necessarily coexistence between the North and South. I would like to beg your pardon for that before I start. And to do this, we've got to start with Trump 2.0, I think. For Americans, it may not be an easy subject, so I will take up that challenge. And to start with my view on Trump 2.0. And President Trump's worldview, if you will, represents a complete departure from the traditional frameworks of US foreign and domestic policies. And at its core is a distinctive set of assumptions about the, sorry, I'm getting farsighted, about the sources of American problems. Domestically, immigrants and the bureaucratic elite, often labeled as the deep state, are cast as the root of the nation's troubles. Internationally, Trump's worldview rests on the conviction that foreign countries and liberal international institutions are unfairly exploiting the United States. And from the premise follows the guiding principle of pursuing the so-called MAGA approach under the banner of America First. In addition, President Trump's policies are marked by a pronounced tilt toward Israel and the Jewish community, as well as by the strong influence of his ego, personal ego, on the policymaking process. So in foreign policy, Trump rejects traditional multilateralism and instead places a premium on bilateral deal diplomacy. This approach is also reflected in his distinctive brand of pacifism, which aims to tackle security challenges ranging from the war in Ukraine and North Korea's nuclear program through direct negotiations and transactional deal making. And at the same time, seeking to avoid this direct involvement in military conflicts and to lessen America's defense and security burdens. He had strongly urged allies to raise their defense spending and shoulder a great share of the cost of hosting American forces. And this Trump-style parallel world, so to speak, is not simply a reflection of personality or political style, but an attempt to fundamentally redefine the framework of US domestic and foreign policy. And as a result of the Trump administration's retreat from managing the world order, international politics has tended toward regionalization, if I may, with traditional great powers such as the United States, China, and Russia, each acting as distinct poles in each regional sphere. The United States is simultaneously attempting to manage three strategic fronts: the rise of China, the war in Ukraine, and the instability in the Middle East. Maybe North Korea could be added as the fourth front in some time to come. Yet these efforts do not constitute a coherent global strategy on the part of the United States. Rather, they are fragmented responses stemming from the core MAGA principle of Trump's parallel world. In response to the Trump administration, both China and Russia appear to be pursuing strategies designed to secure their own national interests. And in effect, contemporary international politics is marked by three great powers, of course the US, China, and Russia, each advancing its own worldview and strategy. And within this unstable great power dynamic, the future trajectory of the international order remains highly uncertain. And at the center of Asia's regional order, China has consistently pursued the expansion of its national power since the end of the Cold War in the 1990s, though its tactics have evolved over time. Under President Xi Jinping's leadership, Beijing has shifted away from the policy of keeping a low profile toward a more assertive diplomacy, grounded in growing confidence in both its military and economic strength. The concept of a new type of great power relations, which Xi Jinping used to advocate, embodies China's aspiration for the United States and China to acknowledge each other as equals. And within this international environment, Japan and South Korea share the common geopolitical condition of being situated among the US, China, and Russia. This is my pet perspective, which I have been advocating over the last 30 years, which is rather than Korean Peninsula surrounded by the four great powers, so to speak, Korea and Japan are surrounded by the three nuclear strategically independent powers. And so this is my perspective with which I discuss Japan-South cooperation, which has been my argument for the last 30 years, as I said. And for that matter, Frank Januzzi introduced his age as being 60, which is the same as 60th anniversary of South Korea-Japan normalization. And I was born 10 years before. I'm now 70, only 2 years after the end of the Korean War. And so I've seen a huge development and change in Japan-South Korea relations over those years. And to me, there is no question that we are on the right track of moving forward. I'll come to this point at the very end. And amid this intensifying US-China strategic rivalry, both countries, I mean Japan and South Korea, must reaffirm their shared strategic foundations and pursue common interests to foster regional stability and prosperity. On the North Korean issue, close coordination between Japan and South Korea is indispensable, particularly in addressing nuclear and missile development. Trilateral security cooperation among Japan, South Korea, and the US, which Frank Januzzi alluded to extensively, constitutes a key pillar of this of this effort. If I may add one thing to this trilateral development, I think improved relations between Japan and South Korea was the trigger of this process of strengthened US, Japan, South Korea trilateralism, which in turn further advanced cooperation between Japan and South Korea. There is clearly a positive feedback loop here. And President Lee Jae-myung's fundamental position to continue on this track is a very encouraging thing, because this in effect means he is going to continue this process of positive feedback. And the positive feedback loop will finish if Japan-South Korea relations get disrupted. I think that is a very important aspect of this trilateralism to me. And at the same time, trilateral dialogue among Japan, South Korea, China, which the chairman alluded to before, Judge Go's remarks, but you didn't mention this, so I will mention that on your behalf. The trilateral dialogue among Japan, South Korea, and China can serve as a reliable framework for regional cooperation, including confidence building. And if the two unilateral frameworks, which are US, Japan, South Korea, and Japan, South Korea, China, these two unilateral frameworks are developed not as competing, but as complementary arrangement, they could make a significant contribution to easing US-China tensions and preventing regional fragmentation. The key to achieving this also lies with Japan and South Korea, the cooperation between Japan and South Korea in dealing with two different trilateral frameworks. And so there is a huge opportunity in the relationship, in many ways. And one encouraging sign that I see recently is the result of opinion polls. There are several opinion polls which are really encouraging. One of them is, if asked, which would you prefer, or which would you expect coming from the next Lee Jae-myung government? This question was posed before the presidential elections. And the two questions were, first, future-oriented cooperation between the two. Second, so-called resolution of history problems. And the answers to the first question, was bigger than the second. And one of our Korea experts called it a golden cross. Golden cross happened for the first time in the opinion poll results among South Koreans. It's a golden cross because if you feel like cooperating, your attitude toward this history problem may gradually change for better direction. If not, it's the other way around. If you continue to believe solving history problem is more important than future-oriented cooperations, perhaps not much progress to be expected. So it's a golden cross, which happened among Korean population. And the other opinion poll result in the recent case was those who have positive feelings toward Japan for the first time in a series of opinion polls exceeded those who have negative views toward Japan. Positive feelings marked about 50% or a little over 50%. And I think these are the sort of the things which are happening in the long-term process of our relationship moving in a better direction. So I have a firm confidence in the future of relationship, even though we may repeat ups and downs for sure. And the President Lee Jae-myung's encouraging kind of attitude toward our relationship as well as trilateralism, I think is one indication that this is maybe happening in the political world as well. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
지금 말씀만 들어봐도
So listening to your remarks,
일본과 미국을 방문해서
President Lee Jae-myung went to the US and Japan, and it looks like, we're seeing those visible outcomes after those summits because many people worried about the relationship between Korea and Japan after the inauguration of the Lee Jae-myung government. But then the Yomiuri News and there was an interview between Yomiuri and Lee Jae-myung, President Lee Jae-myung. And according to that interview, of course, historical issues are difficult issues that we can embrace, but the consistency of our policies and trust building is important. So that is what President Lee Jae-myung said in that article. And so, but then some Japanese, the conservative Japanese, they wanted President Lee Jae-myung to say, we will fight. But instead, President Lee Jae-myung said that we will reconcile the relationship and there will be trust building between the two countries. So they were a little bit disappointed. And also, President Januzzi has also mentioned about Korea, US, Japan cooperation, that this is important for peaceful coexistence. And also, Professor Yoshide also mentioned that not only cooperation between Korea, US, and Japan, but also cooperation between Korea and Japan is crucial for that trilateral cooperation. So if it's a cooperative relationship, not a competitive one, then that will be a key pillar in the peace settlement of the region. And especially Korea and Japan are stuck in between. And that is why these two countries' relationship is very much important in this regional peacemaking. And so next we have our representative from Russia.
그러나 우크라이나 전쟁이 있은 다음에 우리가 서방과 함께 러시아에 제재를 가했고 그래서 불가피하게 비우호 관계로 지금 전락한 한러 관계에서 러시아는 과연 무엇을 생각하고 있는지
We joined to impose sanctions to Russia as well, and
게오르기 떨레라야 선생님 발표를
we would like to ask for his opinion.
First of all,
Thank you.
I'm really thankful to the Minister of Unification and other organizers for inviting me to have the opportunity to speak. Maybe for the first time after the changes of governments in US and Republic of Korea, of the absolutely new situation which we now see in Korean Peninsula. The situation is so different that even the ministry which hosts our seminar is thinking about changing its name from unification to something like Minister of North Korean Affairs or Minister of Peace or whatever, but it reflects the tendency. So the first part of my presentation would be devoted to my assessment of the new situation. And it has become completely different after Kim Jong-un said in late 2023 that we are not striving for unification. We are two separate states, North and South Korea, the Hanmin-guk and Choson-Minjin-Min-Kong-Hwa-guk, which are currently hostile to each other. I personally think this is the right vision of reality. And it changes and should change the attitude of all the parties concerned. My old friend, renowned Soviet and Russian studies scholar Andrew Kuchins in US, yesterday published an article saying that the Cold War had never ended, in fact. That after the Soviet Union collapsed, we found out that the Cold War, that the confrontation between two geopolitical entities, East and West, continued. It was not the war between capitalism and communists, as we mistakenly thought. It was the war, the Cold War, that means without open conflict between East and West, and it continued. At the time, US thought it had won the war, and it can dictate its will not only to Russia, but also to the whole world. That was a mistake, and it backfired. And now we have the conflict in Ukraine with Russian participation, which is just a reflection of this long-term confrontation. We now, in fact, face another chance in Korean Peninsula, because what Kim Jong-un have essentially said, there's no need and no prospect for unification. That means I'm not going to subjugate or conquer South Korea. I'm not going at war with you guys. I just don't care about South Korea, and what I want from you is not to care about me, not to interfere into North Korean affairs, not to try to subjugate us or to install the liberal democracy in my country. I want to be left alone. That's a completely new situation. This is a chance, but don't think that this is the possibility to undermine North Korea, to try to weaken its regime in order to finally fall North Korean apple into your hands. That won't happen. And I like the name of today's session, that's Peaceful Coexistence. Dr. Sandel in the morning have explained that there are several types of coexistence, from just tolerating each other to cooperation and community. North and South Korea are far from that so far. North and South Korea are in the state of confrontation. This is what I call a confrontational stability, because now North Korea feels itself relatively secure more than ever, having both nuclear weapons and having the support of both China and Russia. So they don't feel the great threat to themselves. I've been to North Korea about a month ago in Pyongyang, celebrating the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the country. And North Koreans are quite satisfied with how the things turned out for them. Because the expectations of US and South Korea, which were at place 35 years ago, completely failed. North Korea didn't collapse. All the efforts of US and South Korea, then supported by other countries, including Russia and China, not to let North Korea go nuclear, they failed. So they have reached all their goals. Others did not. Isn't it the lesson for the future? I think it is. I think that it's necessary for the current government to take into account the history lessons both from inter-Korean relations and the global history, the post-Cold War history, which I mentioned, and to be patient enough to start to get at least to the first stage of coexistence, at least tolerating each other, being patient to each other. I think that the first goal is moving from Cold War, which exists now between two Koreas, to cold peace, tolerating each other, and not meddling into each other's affairs, and not trying to damage the interest of each other. Next, maybe cooperation. And I'm sure that Russia and other countries would welcome that and would help it. And as President Putin said a couple of days ago, we don't want to call the countries which were at odds with unfriendly or hostile countries. We think the governments are not friendly. In South Korean case, if I could say that the previous government was not friendly, I cannot say this about this current government. I think it's worth cooperating because Russia is very much interested in peace and stability in Korean Peninsula. And although Russia is a military ally to North Korea, which is seen as an enemy in South Korea, that couldn't prevent us from cooperation. Well, after all, South Korea is a military ally of US, which is, in fact, is supporting the conflict in Ukraine. And de facto, we are fighting US equipment and even US servicemen in Ukraine. But that doesn't prevent us from cooperating with South Korea. And as some speakers have said here, peace and cooperation in Korea cannot be achieved without the endorsement by the powers traditionally involved in the Korean conflicts. That's the four powers, the four countries represented here. I've written about this many times, and now it's time to remind again that I think that it is would be very useful, and the goal should be having some kind of legally binding agreements between all the six parties on the peace and security issues in Korean Peninsula. I'm not talking about denuclearization. It's just useless to talk about it now. But some kind of a security system should be guaranteed by the bilateral obligations of all the six parties vis-à-vis each other, or maybe by a joint Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Pact signed by the six parties. If we want to dream about it, we may even think about a six-party summit for signing this kind of pact. Maybe preceded, of course, by North Korean US summit, which could be a key for such a development. That would take a long time. But at the same time, I think we are now in perfect position if we would try to make Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia an area where the otherwise hostile and opposing power centers of the world can try to find a model for their cooperation, can find a way to correlate their national interests and to find some common denominator for them. That could be a good example not only for Asia, but the whole world, because the contradictions between the geopolitical centers, between the power centers of the world will persist. It's been like that for the last several thousand years, and I don't see that anything will change in the near future as long as humanity is what it is. But we should find the way to cooperate and coexist. And Northeast Asia, where we live in peace, this area is peaceful. If we look at the casualties and victims of conflict in Korean Peninsula for the last 50 years, there are unfortunately dozens of them, but not thousands, not tens of thousands, like in other areas of the world. So this is a confrontationally stable, peaceful area, and it should be developed as such. And it should be developed with the participation of at least the 6 parties which are present here. And I think that if we are patient and insistent, North Korea will join us as well. Thank you.
네, 또르라야 선생님 감사합니다. 여러분들도 또르라야 교수께서 이렇게 써주신 글을 읽어보시고
And also, if you read again the article of Professor Toloraya, you will understand better of Russia's position. And I've also studied a lot about Russia. And so when I listen to these kinds of opinions, Russia, because we are, giving the sanctions right now, they of course had no other way but to sanction. That's what they say. So Russia's position is that we are waging a war against Ukraine, but why are you giving us sanctions? And then so President Putin's position is that we are willing to restore relationship with Korea. So it really depends on Korea. And so Korea is the most friendly country out of those all non-friendly countries. And so Russia wants economic exchange with Korea. And that is actually what is happening. And also our assembly member Woo Won-sik met Putin in China and said that in Russia there are about 130 Korean companies doing business hard. And so because of the war in Russia and Ukraine, Hyundai Motor Group and LG, these companies were doing so well in Russia, but then because of this war, they are actually not doing well anymore. And so it will be best if the war ends soon. But even if not, then still, if the interests of our Korean companies can be protected, I hope that this can also happen. And we need to also do a strategic exchange with Russia for us to see peace on the Korean Peninsula. And so now I would like to ask you all a common question, which is, so Professor Toloraya, you said that if Korea recognizes North Korea and then if the relationship between the two Koreas is improved, then other countries should take part, let's say, like sign an agreement, let's say Professor Soeda and also Chinkwa has also mentioned about trilateral cooperation between Korea, US, and Japan, or Korea, China, and Japan, but normally Russia and China is left out. But when we talk about multilateral cooperation, then normally it's about Korea, US, Japan, and then Russia and China and North Korea. So it's more like a 6-party thing. We've been talking about this more than 2 decades. This has been promoted for more than 2 decades. And so, multilateral cooperation is not just about military level cooperation. There is, like, let's say, infectious disease related cooperation. If there's any infectious disease, we can prevent it. Climate issues, it's not something that a single country can tackle. Every country has to cooperate. Nuclear power, or there are so many issues where we need to help each other out. There are so many issues and problems. And in Europe, there is a lot of multilateral security-related cooperation, but we are not doing that. In Europe, it has been happening for more than 30 years. So it's not just about trilateral cooperation, but it's about Korea, US, Japan, plus China and Russia, or then adding North Korea. Then that will be the best scenario, as Professor Toloraya has also mentioned. And so we need to move beyond trilateral cooperation. We need to add China and Russia into that picture. We need to have bilateral cooperation. And so I was wondering to both of you why you only focused on trilateral cooperation, where we can also expand this level of cooperation. And then, our one and only alliance is the US, and our strongest pillar is US. And Korea and US relationship will always be the pillar of our foreign policy. But then what President Trump is saying, he's only talking about the national interest of the US. Only America first. MAGA, America only. And so only we have to do well. And then you know what happened with our workers who were detained in the US, in Georgia. And so the US is so much focusing only on that. And then they're requesting their other countries saying you need to pay more for the defense budget and so on. So Trump is just requesting so much to its neighboring countries. But then China, for instance, Xi Jinping, what did he say yesterday or a couple of days ago? He said that it's called the assertive diplomacy. So sometimes he is being criticized for assertive diplomacy, but what he is saying is that for the past 5 years, China has been announcing its 4 initiatives, which is first is the Global Development Initiative, Security Initiative, and another cultural-related initiative, and then Governance-related Initiative, and Global Operations Initiative. And so there's the Global Development, Global Security Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative, and then lastly, in Tianjin, there was the SCO committee where he said that Global Governance Initiative is also important. So China is saying that the world is one. It is a single community, and that we all need to protect security. We need to cooperate. We need to respect each other's sovereignty. We should not intervene each other's sovereignty. We need to all live together a better life. I think the US should be saying that, but now Xi Jinping has been emphasizing this for the past 5 years. And so here we have our representatives from China, from the US, and so on. And so I was wondering, in order for the world to be living in prosperity together, the leading countries have to do well. And now we have here representatives from the US as well as China. And so my questions, I have 2 questions. These were the questions, so you just have to answer to them. So who wants to begin? Professor Januzzi, maybe?
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. I cannot speak for the United States. It's a big country with 350 million different opinions about the role that the United States should play in the world. But I want to thank Soya Sensei for saying what I could not, which is that the challenge to the liberal democratic order that we are witnessing is coming from at least 3 locations. I think from Moscow with its war in Ukraine, and its attempts to rebuild a kind of a Soviet sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. From China with a new model of state-directed capitalism, a kind of an illiberal democracy. And from Washington, D.C., where we have an America First philosophy that is at odds with the traditions of the past 70 years of United States diplomacy. And I think that one of the reasons why the Mansfield Foundation endorses trilateralism with US, ROK, Japan is precisely because Korea and Japan are 2 of the nations which have benefited the most from the post-war liberal democratic order. And they are arguably, along with European allies, in the best position to preserve, sustain, enhance, reinforce the norms of the liberal democratic order, which I believe have served global peace and security. And here I must also briefly say that within the United States, there is both the presidency, President Trump, and the Trump administration. And these are not identical. The very first meeting that Secretary Rubio had was a trilateral meeting with South Korea and Japan. And while it is pretty clear that President Trump prefers bilateralism, one-on-one negotiations, his administration has affirmed the value of multilateralism, especially on challenges like the Korean Peninsula. So I will try to answer your question briefly, which is to say that for the United States, let's be real. The North Korea challenge cannot be resolved without a US DPRK breakthrough. Right? That is an essential ingredient. The situation also cannot be resolved without a Pyongyang-Seoul breakthrough, at least on peaceful coexistence. To be candid, all of the other players then, in my view, must play a supporting constructive role in helping to ensure the peace. Their voices are essential, but the breakthrough must come from the US and Seoul, because it is from the United States and Seoul that North Korea perceives the greatest threat. From Seoul, the potential of absorption, and from the United States, the potential for annihilation. So without solving those problems, then none of the efforts of the six parties can be successful. And so I think that we must view the challenges of peace and stability on the peninsula through that lens. And I want to heartily endorse multiple triangles. Yes, US, ROK, Japan, because we share interests and values and democratic traditions. Yes, Korea, Japan, China, because it is within East Asia that these great powers must also find a path forward for peaceful coexistence. And yes, even US, China, Russia, because these three nuclear-armed states must be part of any lasting, sustainable solution on the Korean Peninsula. So I guess Pythagoras, the Greek geometrist, had some wisdom in his triangles. I hope that the United States, under President Trump, even with his preference for bilateralism, can find a way forward with minilateralism in order to help forge a way forward in Northeast Asia.
네, 예, 자칭모 선생님.
Thank you very much, Professor Cha Ching-kwoo.
I think maybe late in the years ahead, when we reflect about this period of international relations, I think one of the contributions in the positive side sense President Trump has made is de-ideologicalization of international relations. I think we have got into too much into an ideological fight and value fight. When you cast international relations as an ideological struggle or value conflict, competition, then that leaves very little room for compromise because it's black and white. It's good and evil. Okay. So when we deal with the Korean Peninsula challenges, probably it's necessary for us to focus on the interests rather than on the values. Okay. Because when we talk about interests, we have shared interests. We have room for compromise. Okay. And what are the biggest challenges in the Korean Peninsula? I think there are two. One is nuclear proliferation. The second is military conflict. Okay. I think both are what all the parties want to avoid. Okay? Maybe the first one, North Korea, maybe an exception. But in the long run, probably it's also in North Korea's interest to give up nuclear weapons if it can feel secure and engage in positive, peaceful development. But in order to tackle these two challenges, I think we need to find all kinds of ways, okay, including all kinds of formats, trilateral, bilateral, multilateral. So we need to explore all, these are all means of, for us to achieve our goal. Our goal is to we need to focus, is to avoid war and also to promote peaceful denuclearization of the peninsula rather than more nuclearization. Last year or 2 years ago, I think I attended a forum here. Ambassador Bolden, John Bolden, was invited as a keynote. He said, U.S. need to deploy nuclear weapons in South Korea, tactical nuclear weapons, and pull the trigger if necessary. I think that's the kind of thing we need to avoid to happen. So we need to be focused and not to be too ideological and try to be pragmatic in dealing with the real challenges we are facing. Thank you.
두 선생님 말씀하시겠습니다.
Thank you very much. And other two professors, Professor Soya,
꼭 안 하셔도 됩니다.
you don't have to. You don't. It's not compulsory to answer the question.
제가 3시에 다른
Well,
세션에서
actually,
발표를
at
해야
3
돼요.
o'clock, I am scheduled to make a presentation in the different session. So actually, I'm a speaker for that session. So I think we will have to wrap up in about 7 to 8 minutes.
Sounds like you don't want me to talk, but maybe just a little bit. Comparison between trilateralism and the more expanded version of multilateral frameworks. I think the answer should be somewhat simple. The former is easier and has a direct impact upon reality. And when it comes to more broader sort of framework, discussion of broader frameworks, I think that is also important because of the power of ideas, perhaps, or even ideals. I mean, those things may be necessary at this time of chaos, right? To give a sense of direction. And but of course, the extent to which those ideas could actually be turned into, real kind of thing, that's another issue. And so I think it's important to make a clear distinction between those two. And okay, I'll finish it. I wanted to say one more thing, but if time is left, I will come back.
Thank you. Well, I do not share Frank's assessment that the decay and, in fact, disintegration of the neoliberal world order is such a tragedy. It's a historical process. It played a role, but the problem was that this neoliberal order, it gave unearned benefits to only one part of humanity. Mostly the Western countries, with the small inclusion of some non-European countries which were deeply integrated and followed the orders, I would say. So now it's disintegrating. It's not because of some evil conspiracy by China, Russia, Iran, and other cranks, or how do they call it, grinks, including other countries, but it's the historical progress because of changing global economy. What comes out of it, I don't know. But surely this new world order will be more just and more transparent. The problem is that the Western countries are not giving up their position peacefully. There are conflicts, and this conflict in Ukraine is just just a small sign of what might come. And we don't want it. Nobody wants war. Nobody wants global war. So the problem is how to find the possibility to find new terms of cooperation, new terms of life in this new world. And for this, I think this Korean Peninsula is maybe a laboratory to try to do this. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for
혹시
sharing
꼭
your opinion.
질문하셔야 될-
Is there anyone who really would like to give us a question?
저기
Okay, I see one student over there.
짧게 해주셔야 되는 건 알겠죠.
Please be brief.
recent years, we have seen a growing trend of deglobalization and national self-interest among many countries. If there is no state or institution to play a pair mediating role in the international community, there is the concern that global order may return to the logic of power. In such a context, what path do you think a middle power country like South Korea should pursue?
네, 우리 대한민국은 아까
Well,
말씀드렸듯이
South Korea,
평화를
like I
지향하고
told you, we pursue peace
그리고 동북아 다자
and reconciliation. And for the peace on the Korean Peninsula and the Northeast Asia, we would like to pursue peace, and we are at the center of that topic. So because we are now carrying out trilateral cooperation, so what's important is to think about our national interest and pursue trilateral cooperation at the same time. To put it simple, the trilateral cooperation with the US and Japan
북한이 우리를
will be crucial for us,
도발하려고 하는
and
그 기능 정도로 우리가 합리적인 수준을
this cooperation should not provoke North Korea, but we will have to protect our land at the same time. And the US-Korea alliance should be pursued continuously, but what's important is to come up with more cooperative measures for the Northeast Asia. And like many other speakers mentioned, it is not about ideology. We have to think about interest, national interest, and based on that interest, we have to pursue different measures. So, for example, we are having common challenges like ODA and climate change and other issues and energy issues. So I think we have to strengthen our cooperation, and unilateralism and multilateralism will play a key role. And so that should be our stance. And for the multilateral cooperation for the Northeast Asian region, I can give you some answer for that. Since Park Geun-hye administration, we've been putting our efforts to do some to come up with some measures for the Northeast Asia issue. For example, if there is any accident that happens in the power plant in a certain country, it is not only that country that suffers from that accident, but it can be proliferated to that region. So other countries also should engage in and help not to make that accident. And likewise, we have common challenges like, drug issues or climate issues or a lot of issues to be tackled at the same time. So for that, I think not only South Korea, but we can cooperate with other countries, including the US, and then we will be able to bring peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I would say, of course, the US-Korea relations will be important, and unilateralism will be also important for the Northeast Asia. But multilateral cooperation will be very important for us. And like Professor Tolore mentioned, we have to recognize each other. I mean, South Korea needs to recognize North Korea and accept North Korea. The fact that the two Koreas joined the United Nations together long ago, that means we are also all respecting one another. So what the current administration is pursuing, I don't know if it will happen in the reality, but the current administration seeks to restore our military treaty and to sign a basic coexistence treaty and to recognize each other as a different state. And if that can become our reality, and that could become the foundation for the multilateral cooperation. In the past, well, we used to do six-party talks, and in that six-party talks, we discussed various measures for the Northeast Asia and other cooperative measures, but now it has disappeared. We can't find that six-party talk. So now what we should pursue is for multilateralism. If we can work closely with the US, I think we will be able to get more effective measures. But I'm really, really sorry, but I have to wrap up here. So I would like to apologize for this inconvenience, but we will wrap up here. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the second plenary session. We would like to thank our moderator as well as our panelists once again. Thank you.